What? I sharply turned my head to look at my wife, Carol. What did you just say? I asked, not believing what I had just heard. Dan, I know you're going to be upset, but I'm not thrilled right now, and I'm thinking of taking a temporary break to sort out my life and figure out what I want, Carol told me while I stood on the terrace grilling steaks. My friend Karen has a spare room, and she said I could stay with her for the time being. When were you planning on telling me, Carol, or were you just going to leave a note on my pillow tonight? I said, a bit louder than I probably should have. Don't raise your voice, Dan. I don't want Andy to hear what we're talking about, she said. Andy, our 6-year-old son. I knew you would react this way, that's why I didn't want to mention it until tonight. In other words, you've already decided to leave. Will you tell Andy, or will you leave that to me after you're gone? I asked sarcastically. I'll tell him myself tonight before bedtime, she replied. It's not forever, you know. Well, yes, you're moving in with that Karen. I guess I should have seen it coming, I said, growing angrier. Tomorrow, I'll prepare the papers, you sign them, and on Wednesday, I'll file them in court. What papers? Her question continued. Well, if you're leaving, I want it to be a legal separation. So when you don't come back, it automatically turns into a divorce decree. That way, we don't have to go through all the trouble twice, I said. I don't want a divorce, Dan, just some time for myself to sort things out, that's all, she said, tenderly. Carol, I snapped, I've been asking you to talk to me for the past 4 months, but you've been too busy with Karen and your new friends to make time. Now you want to move in with your new friend Karen to do what you've probably wanted to do for the last 6 months. I was shouting now, but you won't do it with my blessing, and I certainly won't stay and become a cuckold because of you or anyone else, I said, slamming the grill lid shut. Things were not going at all as Carol expected. She knew Dan would be angry, but she thought she could convince him that this would be an experience for both of them. But now, it was blowing up in her face. Dan, please, was all Carol could get out before he angrily walked away, leaving her staring at the grill. Taking the steaks off the grill and putting them on a plate, she went to find him. He found Dan upstairs in their bedroom. She was literally throwing all her clothes and belongings, taking them to the guest room. Take your stuff and get out. I don't care anymore, I shouted at her. I'll send the documents to your office, you sign them and send them back to Keith, the lawyer I've been dealing with for the past 6 years. Don't worry, I'll take Andy out for dinner so he doesn't have to see his mother leaving, I said, grabbing my coat and my son before heading to my car. Karen, I'm Carol, she began. Dan took it badly, really badly, and he's threatening me with divorce, Carol said, tears in her eyes. I told you he wouldn't be happy. silent partner in the accounting firm where I work. I've brought in a lot of new business over the past 2 years, and the owners made me a partner with a 15% stake. I asked for it to be confidential because I didn't want to be known as one of the owners. That way, I could find out what the employees really thought of the company and how it was being run. My latest achievement was securing a partnership with an overseas associate. About a year ago, I shared some of my ideas with them. They were so impressed that we met the following week to discuss our firm taking them on. Dan, I like the way your firm operates. It seems like you go above and beyond and give a personal touch to everything you do, one of the future owners told me. Each plant now operates independently, so I need someone to set up the same system at each plant, so we can manage them all from an overseas office. They expressed concerns about not handling the overseas operation themselves. However, I convinced them that I would personally oversee everything to ensure there were no mistakes. With the contract signed and a handshake, the celebration began. We had been working on this case for 9 months, and I was eager to get home to Carol with the good news. I would have loved to take her to the best restaurant, bring her home, and celebrate, but when I got home, the house was as empty as her heart. Beth and Andy came in 20 minutes later with Chinese takeout. I was falling apart and needed to tell someone my wonderful news. So I told Beth, forget dinner tonight, we're all going out to celebrate. Put on your best dress because we're going out in style. My bosses made reservations at the best restaurant in town for 8 o'clock and sent a limo to pick us up at 7:30, so we had to hurry. I shaved, showered, and dressed. I told Beth I would get Andy ready so she had more time. At 7:15, Andy and I were dressed and ready to go. Then I saw Beth coming down the stairs. I hope you don't mind, I had nothing unusual, so I found one of your wife's dresses that fits me well, she explained. It fit like a silk glove, but it was a bit short since I'm much taller than Carol. Do you think it looks okay? You look great, Beth. I exclaimed with my mouth open as the bell rang. The three of us were sitting in the back of the limo when Carol drove by our street. What the hell, was all she could say when she saw them getting into the limo. I wonder what's going on, she thought, turning the car to follow them. Then she watched as they got out of the limo and entered the restaurant. This bastard is taking them to the best place in town, and when I wanted to go before, he said we couldn't afford it, she exclaimed. And who the hell was that girl in my dress? We all had a wonderful night. I was the guest of honor, and we ate and drank abundantly. It was Beth who told me it was time to leave since Andy was tired because it was already too late for him. You're right, we'd better leave or we'll never wake him up for school in the morning. I thanked everyone for dinner, but as they shook my hand, they looked past me towards Beth. Beth looked very attractive tonight, and all the women were looking at her with envy. They all heard the story that Carol left to find herself, and Dan seemed to waste no time in replacing her, they whispered among themselves. We returned home in silence because Andy fell asleep as soon as we got into the limo. I took him upstairs, undressed him, and tucked him in, giving him a kiss on the forehead. Good night. I came downstairs still in my tuxedo and saw Beth enjoying a glass of wine at the kitchen table. I want to thank you for tonight, you didn't have to take me with you, she said with a smile. How could I leave you alone tonight? Besides, I really enjoy your company, Beth, I said as I poured myself a glass of wine. I hope you didn't get bored sitting with a group of accountants tonight. On the contrary, I never knew your job could be so interesting and everyone seems to really appreciate you, including me, he said with a slight smile. You make me feel like part of your family, even if I'm just a babysitter. Calming my heart, and damn, I wish my arousal wasn't so obvious, I thought, hiding my excitement from Beth. It's been a long time since I've had real intimacy with a woman. The last times with Carol had been disappointing. I would have loved to take Beth to my room, but I also knew I was still married and would remain faithful to Carol no matter what. Tonight was magical, and my head is spinning with all the things I'd like to do right now, but unfortunately, it won't happen tonight. I told her, maybe if things were different, but they're not, so I need to take a cold shower and go to bed, I told Beth, kissing her on the cheek as I hugged her. It was 2 in the morning when I felt Beth lie down with me. I could tell by the warmth radiating from her that she was naked. I know we can't do anything today, I just want to be close to you, that's all, she said as she hugged me. The next morning I woke up alone. I found Beth downstairs dressed, preparing breakfast for the three of us. No one said anything. Carol was beside herself. Here I am trying to figure out what I want from life with Dan, and he's already dumped me and found someone else, she said, banging the table with the palm of her hand. She had made the mistake of mentioning it to Karen, who told her that all husbands cheat on their wives and that they should go out and celebrate their newfound freedom that night. I didn't feel like going anywhere and partying tonight, and I really wanted to talk to Dan, but he was always in some other damn meeting. Carol and the group gathered again at Tony's, and it was crowded as usual. After a couple of drinks, most of the company went home, but not Carol and Karen. A couple of handsome guys were trying to win her over, and Karen was already kissing one of them. The other guy had her on the dance floor, and when the slow dance started, she melted into his arms. His warm hands slid all over her body, and Carol felt herself slowly giving into his charms. It had been a long time since she had been with a man, and this guy was impressively handsome, had the body of a Greek god, and wanted her as much as she wanted him. She never stopped him when he kissed her while they danced. She never stopped him when he took her to a corner of the dance floor and pressed her against the wall. However, she should have stopped him when he slipped his hands under her dress, caressed her breasts, and moved aside her thong. Yes, she should have stopped him, especially because the private investigator hired by Dan was recording everything. The four went to Karen's house, and although Carol now lay naked in bed next to him, she finally came to her senses. I just can't, she said. I'm still married, and I still love my husband, no matter what. Tomorrow, I need to distance myself, and this will give me time to clear my mind and get my life in order. I told them, Dan, everything's set for the launch on the 12th, which is a week from next Tuesday. Can you be ready? They asked me, give me 2 days to sort out my affairs and fix my apartment to have a place to send my things. I told them I have 2 more people to talk to today, and if everything goes as planned, I'll be ready that same day. I assigned my staff to take care of all my unfinished projects. That same afternoon, I told her that I met with my mother and explained everything, even gave her my power of attorney. Carol will probably be okay by Monday afternoon, but I still want you to put the house on the market next week. Keith will send you a copy of the documents I'm sending to Carol, and if she has any questions, just tell her to talk to Keith. Are you sure that's what you want, Dan? Don't you want to try to fix it with her? My mom asked. She brought this situation upon herself, and now she can lie in the bed she made, I replied. Are you taking Beth with you? She asked, trying to get the last word from her son. I'm not exactly sure where we're going, but she makes me smile and keeps me sane. Besides that, maybe I have some real feelings for her, and that's all I'm going to say. We'll be there Sunday night, so you can say goodbye to Andy. I'll tell Carol on Monday. She was trying to speak with Dan over the phone when they told her at work that he was busy on some special external project but would leave her a message. So, what the hell is he doing, she thought, unsuccessfully trying to get in touch with him. Carol Spencer? The man asked. She nodded. You've been served, he said, handing her an envelope. And now what? She asked, opening the envelope. There was a brief note from Dan saying he had made a decision. I hope you have a wonderful life, that's how he ended it. And then she saw the photos. Oh, was all she could say. Where the hell did he get these photos? She wondered. That son of a must have been following me, she said as she flipped through them. They weren't the kind of photos you wanted to see of your wife with another man. But I've never slept with him. I have to make him realize that, she told herself. Dan is out of the country for 4 or 5 months. He left with Andy on Monday morning. Dan's mother told Carol that she can't take Andy away from me, especially out of the country, she shouted. I'll take him to court and make sure he goes to jail, she yelled. Carol, Dan has full custody of Andy. Remember you gave up that right when you went to find yourself, she reminded her. To say you messed up would be a huge understatement. You had a great marriage, but I think you wanted more, and now you have nothing, Dan's mother told her. I need to talk to him and explain that things are not what they seem, Carol said, sobbing. I still love him, and I've never been to bed with anyone else, Carol. I've seen the photos, and if my husband were alive and doing what you're doing, I'd divorce him too. If I were you, I'd write him a letter and explain what you need, and I'd make sure he gets it. Carol did a good job arguing that alcohol played a big role and that she stopped and hasn't gone that far with anyone since she left. Carol said she still loved me and would wait for me to come back to her. I responded briefly and directly, Oh Carol, you haven't been my wife since you lost weight last year. It seems you got too good for me. You were soaking up all the attention from men and making me feel used. On Wednesday night, when you finally decided to come home with me, you were all hot and horny, and all you wanted was a good not making love to your husband. So now you and Karen can sleep with whoever you want. I told you that eventually Karen would break us apart, but you knew that wasn't true. Andy, Beth, and I are building a new life based on love and trust. You can see Andy whenever you want. Just get your computer modem's camera, and I'll set it up. Sign the papers because Mom is putting the house on the market this week. There's no chance of us getting back together, so don't expect me to change my mind. I hope you finally got what you were looking for, Carol, and be happy, even though I never wanted that to happen. Carol knew Dan was right. She was foolish to listen to all her well-meaning friends who thought they knew what they were talking about. Probably that's why they all got divorced. She was going to fight until she received Dan's letter and finally signed the papers. The irony was that, 6 months later, Carol was back to the 175 pounds she started with 2 years earlier, but she no longer had Dan. I was happy. The job was a bit challenging due to the language barrier, but I overcame it. Andy picked up some words here and there and managed to communicate with all the kids he played with. Beth took care of Andy and set routines for our free time, places to visit, what to do, as she put it. I still remember that night a few months ago. It was right after we arrived in the country, and we were all a bit tense. Andy was struggling to go to sleep, my program wasn't running as smoothly as it should, and Beth felt a bit overwhelmed. She walked into the office, kissed me on the back of the head, making me smile. She leaned in, took my hand, and led me to the room where a candle was on each side of the bed. We undressed and got into bed. Let's say heaven and earth came together that night. We had tender and loving sex for the first time. Over the next months, we did whatever the other wanted as long as it didn't involve pain. We were more than happy. 5 months later, my mom welcomed us at the airport. She was happy to see us all, especially Andy. On the way home, she occasionally looked at Beth, who seemed content. "How far along are you?" she asked. Beth stepped back a bit. 3 months. "How do you know?" "I barely show my face," she replied. "You both seem too happy, like the cat that ate the canary," she told us. 2 weeks later, we got married, and 6 months later, Rhonda was born. When Beth said she wanted to go to the gym to shed the post-pregnancy weight, she looked like she had seen a ghost. 2 days later, I informed her that I had hired a personal trainer for her, and she would do all the exercises. It doesn't make sense to go through all this crap a second time, I thought to myself.